everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today I have used an old t-shirt to make a cropped button front tank top. This project is great for anyone who wants the button detail without the trouble of making buttonholes, as they are just for decoration. So let's get into it. First, I marked how long I wanted my top to be, remembering to add a bit for seam allowance. I drew a straight line across the t-shirt at this point and cut along the line. Keep this bit of fabric, we'll need it later. Next, I took a tank top I owned and used this as a template. I placed it on top of the t-shirt and drew around the neckline and the armholes. I then cut along these lines. I had something like this. I then found the midpoint of my t-shirt, marked it and drew a straight line all the way down. I cut along this line, making sure I was only cutting through the top layer of the t-shirt. I would recommend skipping this as I ended up sewing it back together anyway, which I'll show you later on in the video, but I just wanted to show you that mistakes can happen and can be fixed. I then folded the bottom edge up about ½ inch and pinned it in place. I repeated this for the side edges, but if you skipped the previous step, you won't need to do the sides. Once it was all pinned in place, I sewed where I'd pinned. I repeated this for the top edge of the t-shirt and also around the armholes. This was to hem everything for a neater finish. On to making the button placket. I took the piece of fabric I cut off earlier and cut along the seam to have an open piece of fabric. I also cut off any excess to have a straight edge. I then measured the length of my t-shirt, marked this measurement onto my piece of fabric and drew a straight line down the fabric at this point. Once I'd done that, I marked 1 inch up from the bottom edge at various points and connected them with a straight line. I then cut along these lines. This piece of fabric will become the button placket. The placket can be wider if you want to use larger buttons. This is where I decided to sew my t-shirt back together again, as I realised there was an easier way to add the button placket. Then I placed the button placket onto my t-shirt, making sure they lined up and pinned it in place. I repeated this on the bottom and down both sides. Once it was all pinned in place, I sewed where I'd pinned. This is how it looked. Next, I decided where to place the buttons. I placed the first one ½ inch down from the top and the rest 1½ inches away from each other. When I was happy with where they were placed, I marked this with chalk. You can place your buttons wherever you like. I used a thread the same colour as my t-shirt so it would contrast with the buttons. I threaded my needle and tied a couple of knots in the end of the thread. I then sewed each button onto the t-shirt. I will show you in more detail how to sew buttons on in an up and coming how-to video. Once they were all sewn on, the top was complete and this is how it looked. This is a great way of recycling an old t-shirt and adding a simple yet effective detail. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.